Jeremy Fowler on NFL Live reported some pretty insane details behind this Rashod Bateman extension and this entire offseason between Bateman and the front office. We'll dive into those details. We also hear directly from Eric DeCosta on a Lamar Jackson contract extension update. All that and more in today's episode of the Flock Rundown.
Ravens Flock. Flock Rundown is the place to be.
Motionless brainwaves attempt to swim their way to sense, can't tame the untamed.
What's up, Ravens fans? My name is Ryan, and welcome back to another episode of the Flock Rundown. If you haven't hit the subscribe button, hit that subscribe button, man. We are almost at 10K. Over 70% of the people that watch the channel don't subscribe to the channel. So let's get to 10K this weekend, man. I appreciate you guys so much. Now let's dive into this Rashod Bateman news. So I'm going to play the clip and then we'll talk about it.
So this is fascinating. What led to his contract extension was that he was almost traded during this offseason because he went to the Ravens, wanted a new deal. They essentially said no, but they gave him permission to seek a trade. So he went out on the open market, talked to teams, and I was told there were several involved or had interest. Dallas Cowboys, New England Patriots, Green Bay Packers. So he saw he had a market. Yeah. The Ravens saw that and said, okay, we'll just pay you instead. We won't trade you.
It definitely makes sense that Rashod would be wanting a new contract after the season that he had last year. We obviously know he was on an absolute steal of a contract for the team, making $3 million and then $5 million, $6 million. I mean, it was a very low deal for a wide receiver his caliber, and the Ravens signed him to that deal because he had some agent issues, which, you know, they missed the deadline for the fifth-year option, so that wasn't even on the table. And then he was having all those injuries, so he ended up just signing an extension for a very low amount. And then last year came back, proved his worth, more than his worth, outperformed that contract tremendously, and then went back to the table this offseason. So I didn't know if that was going to come, you know, next year or the year after. I knew at some point Bateman was going to have a contract issue, but it was this year. It was this offseason. He went to the front office. This is according to Jeremy Fowler, but I don't really think he's going to hop on ESPN and NFL Live without any credible source. I just highly doubt he's just completely making this up. So he's saying Bateman went to Eric DeCosta this offseason, goes back to that Know Your Worth tweet too, by the way, but goes to Eric DeCosta and says, hey, I need a new contract. Like, you saw what I did last year. That value's just not enough. Let's talk about an extension. The Ravens essentially said no. I'm sure there was more details than that, but the way Jeremy Fowler reported it, the Ravens essentially said no. So they then said you could seek a trade. So they start shopping Bateman around, and the Cowboys are interested. The Patriots are interested. The Packers are interested. And the Ravens go, hold on, there's a market out here. Let's just lock Bateman up. And we heard about the Cowboys wanting to trade for Bateman a few weeks ago. I made a video on it where they were trying to get Bateman before George Pickens, and the Ravens said no. So at that point, the Ravens were taking calls on Bateman and kind of feeling out the market. And I think they felt that there is a pretty solid market out there for Bateman. So let's go back to the table with Bateman and figure out numbers that work for both sides. And then boom, you get this new extension. So I think everything's good. This is not a negative, report or news. Bateman's obviously locked up for the next 5 years with the Ravens. He's happy to be locked up. The Ravens are happy to have him locked up. So I don't think this is bad or anything, but it's very interesting. This is a fascinating report and a lot of inside information that I didn't expect to hear. I was wondering, it is very odd that you get extended back-to-back years, right? Last year he signed a extension, and then this year he signs an extension. So now he's got 5 years on that deal left, and it kind of comes out to an average of $9.5 million. If you add all the extensions together over that 5 years, it's a $9.5 million annual salary, which is still, in my opinion, a steal for a wide receiver of Bateman's caliber. But more fair value for him. He gets security. He gets money closer to what he wants. This new extension basically doubles his old salary. I know it comes out to an average of 9.5, but those new years that he just added on are like $12 million a year. So he's going to make double what he's making. He's got 5 years of security, and the team gets a very, very good wide receiver for the next 5 years at a team-friendly value, in my opinion. I mean, look at that wide receiver market. And I know Bateman hasn't had years like he had last year, multiple years of that where he can prove consistency and build up more leverage to be like, no, I want 20 million. I don't think he's at that spot. I think his talent warrants something like that, but his production on the field hasn't reached a $20+ million valuation. So it's so smart for the team to go back to the table and get this done. I would have been really pissed if we would have traded Bateman. I feel like he was on a great deal, and then obviously he wasn't really wanting to play on that deal anymore. He went to the organization. He's like, listen, we got to get a new contract done. And they didn't want to do a new contract because they're like, you're on a great deal. But once they saw the market, they were forced to go back to the table. So good job being flexible with Eric DeCosta and whoever was involved in these negotiations. Great job being flexible. And I think they probably should have just paid Bateman anyway, but this is how business goes. This was part of the negotiation. They essentially were like, hey, you signed the contract. We just extended you last year. We're not ready to go back to the table yet. And then Bateman's like, nah, man, like we got to go back to the table. And then the Ravens are like, well, let's see what your trade market is. Let's see what the market is out there. And they saw that there's a market, and now they're like, okay, fair enough. Let's go back to the table. Let's figure it out. So business is tough. That's not an easy situation to go through for either side, but I'm glad it worked out. I'm so glad Rashod Bateman is in a Ravens uniform for the next 5 years. Eric DeCosta also went on Jerry Coleman's podcast, and he was asked about Lamar Jackson's extension updates, and this is what he had to say.
So are you talking with him right now about things, or just letting things lie as they are?
Well, we've had some conversations before the draft, after the draft, in person last week. I think we're in the introductory sort of stage of looking at what an extension might look like. We've got a lot of business that we're conducting with different players, and we're in a situation where we're blessed to have most of the team coming back. But as we look out over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we're trying to keep as many good players as we can. So we've got some guys that we feel like have the chance to really be prolific players for us that can be here a long time. We're trying to get as many of those guys signed up as possible. That's a big challenge, and Lamar's certainly a big part of that, but there are other players as well.
That Lamar Jackson extension is coming soon. I know he said they're in the introductory parts of that conversation, but they've spoke multiple times, and they've already figured out a contract before. It is a little different because Lamar doesn't have an agent, but they've went through this process before, and it was a grueling process, if you guys remember. I mean, it took a long time. Lamar demanded a trade. It was a crazy process. I do not see this one being like that. I think that it might take a little time, but they are going to figure it out. They have to figure it out. I mean, his cap hit goes to $74 million next year. Like, the Ravens aren't paying that. So Lamar Jackson will get extended, hopefully in the next few weeks, in the next few months. But at some point this year, before next season starts, Lamar Jackson will be extended. And he will be the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. He will probably sign the biggest annual number in NFL history by any player, and it's well-deserved. Also in that clip, Eric DeCosta talked about all the guys that he has to consider paying and the guys that he also needs to extend, like Linderbaum or Isaiah Likely, or what's he going to do with Odafe Owe, Travis Jones, Marlon Humphrey, Mark Andrews. All these guys are free agents. So there's some massive cap crunching numbers that need to get done, strategy, decision making. I mean, who do you keep? Who do you extend? Who do you try and extend right now? Who do you wait until next year? There's just so many guys. They still got to pay Kyle Hamilton. That's not as pressing because he's not a free agent next year. They picked up his 5th-year option. But, the Linderbaums, the Likeleys, Andrews will probably let walk, but the whole tight end room's free agents. Odafe Owe, Travis Jones, Marlon Humphrey, Daniel Fa'alele. I mean, there's just so many free agents next year that we got to start getting some extensions done, and decisions are just going to have to be made. You know, I know you can push some off and just wait until next offseason and figure it out. Like, I would imagine that's what they're going to do with Odafe Owe. Let's see how Owe looks this year. You know, with the weight gain, does he go into like Pro Bowl, all pro mode, and he becomes an elite player in the league? Well, let's consider extending him. Does he have a season similar to he had before, where he's going to get a pretty big payday, but Baltimore just can't really afford it, and it isn't worth paying $20+ million for? Then he prices himself out of Baltimore, and they can just make that decision next offseason. I kind of see they're probably going to play the wait and see game with Owe, but let's extend guys like Isaiah Likely, Tyler Linderbaum right now. There's no reason to wait. I think you could get, you know, a Bateman style deal with an Isaiah Likely, right? You don't have to pay top dollar. Linderbaum, you're going to have to pay up, no doubt. He's already proven himself. But I'm just saying, the earlier you get deals done, the cheaper it is. And there's definitely guys that we can't afford to lose. So I think we should get those contract extensions done as soon as possible. But Eric DeCosta is obviously working on that. And I think we'll start to see some extensions announced very soon, including Lamar Jackson. But that's it for today, guys. Let me know what you're thinking about everything. The Bateman news kind of threw me off a little bit. I was like, I got to come on here and talk about this, man. I did not see all that behind the extension. You know, I was a little shocked by the extension back-to-back years. Now I know why. And pretty interesting story. But let me know what you guys are thinking about everything. Appreciate you guys, as always, for tuning in to another episode of the Flock Rundown. Have a beautiful rest of your day. And I'll let the greatest linebacker in the history of the game take us out.
Ravens flock. Flock Rundown is the place to be. My man Ryan has been a lifelong Ravens fan since he was born. The Flock Rundown. Nothing gets better than waking up and wondering how high we can fly. Tune in.
Motionless brainwaves attempt to swim their way to sense, can't tame the untamed.